Hey guys, so I've got 6 different sources where I can get news from, and this is all to automate my second newsletter that I want to sort of bring leads on automatic. So check out my n8n workflow right over here. So at a specific time of the day, it'll trigger, and this over here is my global system prompt, because instead of having to go all the way here to each OpenAI node and tweak all of them is a bit, tedious and boring. And we all hear about automation. So this one here over here, let's open it up, and it will just say analyze the following articles and headlines and content snippets, determine if it's AI related or relevant. So I just basically filtered for any big tech news from Apple, Google, DeepMind, OpenAI, Nvidia. You can read the entire prompt here. So this will tell it to give either a single word, which is true or false, for what we'll do later on, which I'll get into in just a bit. So let's go back. And once we run our system prompt, the first thing that we need is to get our RSS feed. So this here is essentially an HTTP block, which will get the URL, which is this one here, and filter by artificial intelligence topics, so AI or artificial intelligence, and then it will get that topic. Then we'll go ahead and convert our XML that we get from our RSS feeds to a JSON format. We then go ahead and split out that into different, we just want to get only the items from this here and not all of the other metadata that we get. So I think let's quickly see if we can run this. I'll just have to disable all of these other ones over here. Need to disable. It might take some time. All right, let's see if we execute the workflow. So first up, we're getting our system prompt, which then goes into here. Now it's getting our RSS feed, which as you can see is over here. It's all blob of text, but that's not a problem because we're going to be splitting that out and filtering it out right over here in our XML one that we've got right over here. We've got in our feed. So large chunk of text, but not a problem. Here we're going to be splitting that out. So here we can see we've got author, title of what we're going to do, and all of the different terms, or rather our tags. We got a summary of it as well as the content. Now this is fairly easy to obtain. You'll see at the later stage we'll have a much bigger challenge in getting our content, but we have a workaround for that. So then we loop through each and every item over here. In some cases we didn't get our image URL, and this is what this code block is for. So this code will essentially get whatever we have here plus our image URL, which we have right at the bottom. If you can get there, yeah, there's our image URL. So this is the one that we're going to use. And basically for this entire project, I'm using Supabase to store all of the articles. And what I'm doing for all of the feeds is that I'm storing it into a Supabase database. Actually makes it much easier to handle this type of data. Much so easier than storing it in a Google Doc or Airtable. But that's according to me. You may decide to swap this out for something else. So this is my table over here. I've got one for articles. That will be my final articles that we will create, but right now it's empty. This gives you an example of what we currently have. I'm going to delete both of these for now. And then we're going to go back here, and I seem to have an error on this side here. Okay. I implemented a little fix. Let's see if that works. So now what's going to happen is that it's going to go through our system prompt that we created earlier. And if you go into this here, you can see that we set this prompt here from that initial set field, as well as our title and our content that we have inside. So we'll wait for this to work, and we'll come back in just a bit once we have our database populated. So just to go a bit into what's actually happening here is like we're going through this whole process. We're seeing if previous item exists, and then we're going to go loop through it over and over again. And if we're happy with what we have, so essentially we're going to take this into our AI agent, which is going to say, is this AI related? And is it related to the topics that I want to cover essentially? So for example, what we mentioned, is it from OpenAI, Anthropic, Grok, anything mentioned Elon Musk, we want that in AMD, Apple, all of those things. We want this agent to filter topics that only I'm interested in, and I think my audience will also be interested in. You can obviously tweak this to whatever you want for your personal newsletter. And the beauty part of it is that you don't need to just limit it to just newsletters. You can have maybe an article. You can search and curate a whole bunch of articles and create maybe 10 or 15 long form articles just on whatever news feeds you get. So that's pretty amazing. So then we just output yes or no over here, which if you remember we did earlier. Then here it'll say if yes, then we'll update the row in Supabase. And if we don't like the article, if this thing rejected the article, then we'll delete that row. So if we go to Supabase and we essentially refresh, you can see we've got our articles from The Verge. So if you look here, we've got one on Zuckerberg's personal superintelligence. Tim Cook says Apple must figure out AI and will make an investment. Then we've got one for Amazon, Anthropic, Bing. So I'm pretty happy with what we have. We've got the link to those articles. We've got the actual content, which you can clean. We've got a content snippet, which is essentially a summary that we'll check out. Our image URL that we can use. The source, which is The Verge. And should we draft this article? All of them are true because the other ones that we didn't want to draft obviously deleted. So essentially the only other alteration I would make is just to filter out this content. But you know, the AI can go and make it into a nice little block that we can put into our newsletter. So my vision is essentially to have different blocks. So it'll be a short block similar to Superpower Daily, Alpha Signal, The Rundown, all of these different cool newsletters out there. So to make little blocks and use them in my own personal newsletter. All right, so that is done. We can comment this one out. Now you might think the rest is just easy copy and paste, but it's not. let me get to it. So I'm just going to disable all of these and enable the one from the TechCrunch. And I'm not going to run it again. I'm just going to show you essentially what is different from the previous iteration. So here, from here till here, it's more or less the same, but we're getting a little bit more topics. So I'm limiting it to just 10 news items. We're looping through it. And then over here, what we're doing is we're doing an HTTP request. Now, the reason why we're doing this is because the content is essentially truncated. So it's condensed and encrypted. So we are unable to get the content from there. So we have to do a separate HTTP request. We feed it the link. And we essentially want to get the content from there. So I think I'm just going to run it. Let's see how it goes. And if you look over here, we have a bit of code that will take the raw output that we have from here and then convert it into a much more structured output. So we've got title and content, as well as a summary and all of the tags that we have. And that essentially goes through the same workflow for updating our Supabase. So that's going to update our database and go through everything as it's supposed to. Now I'm getting the same error here. Essentially, all I have to do is just move this title into there and do the same for content, which we got over there, right? I'll probably have to do that again in just a bit, but let's just run this and let's update our database. And the rest of the workflow is exactly the same. Now, while that thing is running, we're going to go into another workflow or another source. I'm just going to enable it. And this one is very similar to the one above, but now we are using Firecrawl, which is pretty amazing. But the only thing with Firecrawl is that we get rate limited and you have to pay at some point, but you get a whole bunch of free credits every month, which is pretty cool. So that's why I've got this wait block which will basically allow us to not get rate limited. And then we have our Firecrawl thing. Yeah, there is a dedicated n8n node for Firecrawl, but I did it using the HTTP request, mainly because I was unable to get Firecrawl to install for whatever reason. And we do the same thing where we get our output from there. I've got a separate code which is different from that code. Essentially what this code does is that it takes whatever we get from Firecrawl and converts it into a compatible format for our Supabase. So right now I'm going to disable both of these and we're going to enable the one from artificial intelligence news. If you look at our database, let's just refresh and see what we have. Cool. So you can see we've got quite a few things. At some late stage, we'll go through all of these probably in the next video and cut out all of the duplicates. So over here, we basically do the exact same thing. There's a few changes here and there, but it's more or less the same. We just have to be careful how we get the data and make sure that we have it in the correct format. And then we are almost done. I'm just going to activate this one here. This one is using Perplexity. And we have Perplexity here, which we look at our news here. Is to say, give me the latest and hottest AI news and automations on agentic AI news. And I want to filter out by big tech companies. I told it to do not give me any news from Delta Airlines because I'm not interested in the Delta Airline. And the news must be from the past 24 hours. And then I gave it today's date. So obviously here I'm getting an error because I'm supposed to put in this one here. So I'm just going to change this and put the readable date. So it gets the up-to-date stuff. It's going to say that. So there it goes through. It gets formatted. We get this in JSON format, and then we loop through the same thing as we did before. We don't need any processing, and we just send it straight into our database. Then we filter it to say, is it AI related? Most of it is, but we just want to filter out by some articles that we like and do not like. And finally, we have this one that we use with SerpApi. It's going to enable this one. So here we use this SerpApi or SERP. We do a Google search, and we're just essentially searching for artificial intelligence tech news. Because there's a lot of news items out there, we limit it essentially to about 10. That goes into this same loop that we have over here. And we get to extract each site. We go through each URL and we get the content from there, which we clean the content because, there's so many different sites, so many different formats. So we can't really specify a format in code. So we use a large language model like GPT-4.1 mini, and we get it in a structured output that goes into our merge block and essentially updates our database. So that is it from me. If you want this entire workflow and to scrape any source out there possible, whether it's RSS feeds, using AI with Perplexity, or even maybe having SEP for Google News Search and Tavily, you've got all of these options here. Eventually, what you could do is you could just take all of these, merge them into one big database, which I'm going to do. And I plan to have maybe a dashboard, a custom dashboard that will essentially allow me to pick and choose which news items I want and also filter it to get rid of all the duplicates. And yeah, if you want this automation, type AI automations down below and I'll send you this for free. You can also sign up to my free newsletter at the same link. And we have an automations framework which will say on which of the 5 levels are you on. Are you on level 1 where you automate tasks, or are you on level 2 where you automate workflows? Level 3 is taking the workflows and making systems. And then we go to departmental automation, and then finally enterprise level automation. And if you want to see how we take this workflow and convert it into a newsletter via Substack, then check this video up right over here.